through education and skills training programs. As we all know, a happy and healthy marriage is necessary for the future of our children and will benefit the entire community. Netzach is being launched in the weeks of Shovalim, which is a propitious time for Klal Yisrael to learn and review the halachas and hashkafas of Shalom Bayis and Taharas HaMishpacha, both of which bring Kedusha into our homes. By strengthening the family unit and helping to create more meaningful and fulfilling marriages, we will be inviting the Shekhinah into our homes, bringing simcha and bracha to all that we do, and creating an ideal environment in which to raise a Yiddish mishpacha. Our tefillah to Hashem is that we may be zocha to have the hatzlacha and siyata dishmaya to achieve our goals. It is a great privilege for me to introduce our first speaker for tonight's program, who really, in this shul, needs very little introduction. Rabbi Chaim Yosef Ackerman is the assistant rabbi here at Beit and has been instrumental in the foundation of this organization. We wish Rabbi Ackerman much hatzlacha here in the shul, along with his wife and children. Rabbi Ackerman.
Good evening and welcome to the second of Netzach's inaugural events. Last week, over 300 people attended Divrei Chizuk and Hizoros by Rabbi Shmuel Dishon down south at the Beis Yaakov Saranac, resulting in dozens of people who not only furnished their feedback about what they would like to see and hear and participate in together with Netzach. In addition, a number of people have already signed up and expressed an interest in the workshops that have been scheduled for the month of February. And the committee sees that the need not only is something that must be brought to the people, but the people have responded overwhelmingly to that need and welcomed with open arms the Avodas HaKodesh that the committee and Netzach has undertaken for the community of Toronto. The Medrash Tanchuma on Parshas Kiseitze tells us, quoting a pasuk from Navi al tiyu kisus keferet ein havin, with very strong terminology, the Navi says not to be like an ignorant horse, like a mule that rushes headlong into battle without checking its surroundings, its repercussions. Explains in the Tanchuma that a person without a proper framework will not repay a tova that has been done for them, a favor, with a favor in kind. Will not pay back something detrimental, something negative, with a disfavor in kind. And here the obvious question on the Medrash is, how do we understand that a person, through utter ignorance, who may continue on through their lives without an understanding, without an enhancement, without capitalizing upon their opportunities? But what is the danger of not repaying a favor with another favor in kind? Of not understanding when someone has done something wrong, to return, so to speak, that disfavor in kind? Here, Rosh Hashiva Zatzal, Rav Leibowitz explained that the basic lack of awareness that a person may have is something that can result in catastrophic results. A person who continues and progresses through life without focusing on what it is that they are involved in, how they can optimize their experience, how they can gain even more, will ultimately ignore that which surrounds them, will ignore opportunities, will fail to return favors, and will fail to understand what is positive and what is negative. And the results will be disastrous. The basic awareness, in speaking with people over the last few weeks, leading up to our events, in the last number of months, that the devoted committee wishes who deserves a tremendous yasher koach in cultivating and designing and thinking and speaking with people about what it is that they would like to hear, what it is that they would like to learn more about, how to gain from their marriages, from their experiences, from their relationships, how to deal with different difficulties and issues that arise. The world around us and its financial pressures that are unparalleled, for at least the immediate past, as far as many of us can remember. What is it that people would like to hear about? How is it that we can make ourselves even more aware and look back and say, that was a point at which we learned something new, educated ourselves, and understand, yet even better, what it is that we are accomplishing. I'll share with you one more chazal, a sefarno, from the very beginning, the very end, of Parshas Noah. In understanding what it is that we have set out to accomplish this very evening. We gather here with expectations, and as many people as there are in this room, that is how many different and unique expectations, anticipation of what we will hear, what kind of chizuk we will draw, and how we will incorporate that information, that knowledge, into our daily lives, into our families' lives. The Sefarno at the end of Parshas Noah comments on the fact that when Terach left to go to his destination, Pasuk leaves us almost hanging. It does not tell us of Terach's arrival. It says that after a number of years, Terach passed on. Whereas we know that Avram Avinu traveled from Haran, we are told that he arrived at his destination. A subtle yet powerful distinction. And the Sefarno mentions that this is in very sharp contrast. Whereas Terach left and did not accomplish his goal, didn't reach his destination. Avram left and he reached his final destination. Seemingly, once again, a very obvious statement of fact. But I believe what the Sefarno is sharing with us is the difference in the Vayetze, the difference at the point of departure. At this very point, we have in front of us and share the company of Tzvi Hirsch, Weinreb Shlita, an experienced Rav, Manig of Klal Yisrael in his own right, psychotherapist, whose involvement has spanned very many areas of Jewish life. As I say, we have many different expectations, what we'd like to hear, an issue in Klal Yisrael in our own lives, in our own communities that we would like to be addressed. And some of them might be, and some of them may not be. But that point of departure in the Vayetze will make all of the difference in the world. The point of understanding at this point that we are establishing ourselves and making ourselves ready to hear and to accept what the journey will bring our way. What the Divrei Chizuk will contain this evening, what future workshops may contain, conversations with lay leadership, with Rabbonim, with experts, professionals, and with each other. And understanding that that Vayetze can make all of the difference in the world, the determination and the ultimate result of our reaching that destination. May we resolve at this moment to undertake, to optimize the experience of our Shalom Bayis, of our relationships with our spouses and with our families, and may that experience bear very tangible and meaningful fruit for each and every one of us, for Klal Yisrael at large. Yiratzon that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should accept Ma'aseh Yadeinu, Chenu L'Chesed L'Rachamim, that we should see those results and ultimately strengthen ourselves to accept Mashiach Tzidkenu from here of Yameinu.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Before we hear from our keynote speaker, I would like to firstly thank all of the men and women of our community who made it out on this very, very cold night to hear these warm words of chizuk. I would also like to thank the organizers of tonight's event, who gave many hours to plan this night's program and who helped to establish Netzach. As well, our thanks go out to the sponsors of tonight's event. Thank you for enabling Netzach to do its work on behalf of the Tzvi. On your seats, when you came in and around the room, there are programs. If you look at the program, it's a trifold. And the last part, the third part, is a tearaway. Please fill it in. You can register for the workshops and give us feedback about topics that you'd like to hear discussed in the future, lectures that you'd like us to present. Netzach is a new organization. We need your help. So please fill it out, and there are drop boxes at the doors where you can deposit the papers in. Our featured speaker for the night is Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, who is currently known by the title of Executive Vice President of the Orthodox Union. As you can see from his bio on your handout, his qualifications are numerous. He is, of course, a Rabbi, a practiced psychotherapist, and is involved in many areas of Jewish life, particularly with the sensitivity to the issues facing Jewish couples and shalom bayis. Rabbi Weinreb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Rabbi Ackerman, for your hospitality. It's no secret, everyone knows, that we're in the throes of a tremendous financial crisis. And Jewish leaders of all kinds and types have been gathering over the past several months to discuss the crisis and the impact that it is having and will have on Jewish life, in the United States and Canada, throughout the world. I was at such a conference about a week ago with several leaders who are leaders of the general, called the general Jewish community, not the Orthodox community at all, quite far from the Orthodox community, but concerned about the crisis, the impact that it's having and will have on the important Jewish institutions. And the speaker said, well, the two most important institutions in Jewish life are really already hit hard and will be hit even harder in months to come. Two institutions I'm speaking about, the speaker said, are the synagogue and the Jewish schools. And of course he's correct in that our shuls and our schools are suffering already and are very vulnerable, will suffer all the more as the effects of this crisis spin out until there begins to be some kind of fundamental improvement. But what struck me sitting there is how this man could say that the two most important institutions in Jewish life are the synagogue and the school, the Jewish school. And afterwards we had a little coffee break and I sat down with him. He had some very important ideas. This is a person who puts his money where his mouth is a big philanthropist. Deserves respect. And I told him respectfully, I have to disagree with you. No way are the two most important institutions in Jewish life the synagogue and the school. There's no way. And I said to him, do you realize that there are centuries and centuries of Jewish history when there were no synagogues and when there were no Jewish schools and Judaism got along just fine? Because I told him, in my opinion, the most important institution in Jewish life is clearly the family. I can imagine a thriving Jewish community without a synagogue. I can imagine a thriving Jewish community without a Jewish school. Until Yeshua ben Gamla, there were no Jewish schools. Children were taught at home. And the psukim that we know Simple psukim, Shinantam Levanecha, V'limaylatem es Panecha. Parents taught children. This was always the way it was until, from the perspective of Jewish history, relatively recently, that schools were instituted. But there was never a moment in Jewish history when there wasn't the Jewish family, because the Jewish family is the essence of Judaism, from Avraham and Sarah right down to our days today. Without a Jewish family, I cannot imagine Jewish life. He attributed what I was saying to, well, that's how you Orthodox think. And he was thinking differently. But there's no question in my mind, I'm saying this correct, there's no rival, no competition among Jewish institutions throughout our history as the Jewish family. Each of us sits here for a moment, this takes a minute to reflect upon your own background and the influences that brought you to this point, whichever spiritual religious point you're at today. In most cases, it was your family, your parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, cousins who brought you to this point. Not schools, and certainly not synagogues. Obviously they had, in fact, an important effect. But not as much as, in most cases, as the family. And indeed, one of the best proof texts for this argument is from what Rabbi himself says about Avraham Avinu. He adopted. Rabbi says, I love Avraham Avinu. Rashi says adopted means I love him. He's precious to me. Why is Avraham precious to God? Because he was so kind and open house, so generous. No. Because he was a hero, a war hero? No. Because he prayed for stone and challenged God himself? No. God says, I love him for one simple reason. He's a family man. Yadativ, Laman, Shegitzava, Spono, Yisfeso, Achel, Lasel, Stoko, Mishma. So I know he's going to raise a family, he's going to raise children, he's going to teach them to do tzedakah, to do mishpat, justice, righteousness, love. He's going to have a family. That's why I love him. He's a family man. It's as simple as that. That's what makes Avraham and Sarah precious to God. That they were father and mother, that they were husband and wife, not that they were teachers, not the Hanefesh Asher Asu B'chora, the worldwide Shuva movement. That wasn't their major accomplishment. The major accomplishment, the one that God singles out himself for his special recognition, is they were father and mother, they were husband and wife. I want to share with you just a tip, a small sample of a very important essay that I would encourage you to read for many reasons, the topic of tonight, but other topics as well. And it's an essay by all the Gedolei Yisrael of the past 150 years. There's one who wrote on the topic of family and on the topic of school education in a way that no other great Jewish sage wrote before or since. And his writings, although they were written in the latter half of the 19th century, are germane and relevant today. I'm speaking of none other than Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Samson Raphael Hirsch, whose collected writings are now available, newly translated into English, set of many, many volumes, has so much to say about the Jewish family, and it's so timely. I recommend all of his works to all of you. But in his works, you will find one essay. Hirsch wrote in German mostly, and I read him in Hebrew, although he's available in English translation too. The essay I'm referring to in Hebrew is called Shituf Pu'ula Bein HaHorim U'Beit HaSefer. The joint venture, the mutual project of raising children, the role of the school, the role of the parent. Now, Hirsch has some very interesting and provocative ideas about what schools should be teaching and what parents should be teaching. But let's just focus for tonight's topic on what he says parents should be teaching their children. And Hirsch claims that it's only parents who can teach these lessons. The school cannot. Here are the lessons. This is the agenda for the Jewish family. Love of truth. Appreciation of justice. Brotherliness, friendship. Compassion and kindness. The Hebrew translation of the next word is vatranus, vatranut. Vav, taf, resh, nun, vav, taf. Which means levater, to yield. Best English word that I can come up with to translate vatranus is spirit of compromise. Forgiveness. The importance of forgiveness. Something not on the school agenda for Hirsch. It's on the family agenda. Humility. Next one that's not so popular these days, but maybe our financial difficulties will make it more popular. Istakut b'muat. Istakus b'muat. Being satisfied with a little, not needing all the luxuries of the world. A sense of responsibility to one's duties. And finally, a sense of joy, simcha, and pride in the successful completion of one's duties. A beautiful list. Hirsch is listing this mainly for the family as parents teach children. But I like to focus on some of these topics, just looking at the parents themselves. Mother, father, husband, wife. The need for there to be a relationship based upon truth, honesty, avas oemes, candor, appreciation of justice, of mishpat, friendship between mates, between spouses, and between spouses and others. There's no greater blessing than friendship. Compassion and kindness toward each other, obviously. Compromise, yielding to the other. Forgiveness. You know, there's stories about numerous abilities from before they went to sleep at night, made sure that they had kind of cleaned the deck and forgiven everyone that they may have offended, especially their spouses. Humility, istapkus b'muat, responsibility to each other, and a sense of joy and pride in the successful completion of the duties of the couple. That the couple feels a sense of achievement. We set certain goals for ourselves. There could have been spiritual goals or material goals. We reach those goals, we feel simcha. That's what true simcha is, the achievement of defined objectives. No greater simcha in the yeshiva than siyum. You know, you set an objective for yourself, you learn a masechta, you finish it, that's a sense of accomplishment. Couples need to have objectives. Couples need to have goals. When they achieve those goals as couples, that's the source of simcha. So this is Rav Hirsch's list, and obviously there could be other things on the list as well. I'm going to return, as time allows, to some of the items on this list, particularly compromise. But first of all, I want you to reflect with me on what is the meta lesson that we can learn from Hirsch's essay. Rav Hirsch is teaching us, and the key word here is teaching us. He is teaching us that it is possible to teach honesty, humility, forgiveness, etc. Not only is it possible, but it is necessary to teach those virtues and those values. A person doesn't become a forgiving person out of instinct or out of divine inspiration. A person doesn't become humble or honest or virtuous or satisfied with his lot instinctually. It's something that he has to be taught. So these virtues are teachable, number one. And number two, there are ways to teach them. It's possible for a person within a family, parent to child, or parent to parent, spouse to spouse, to teach and to learn. And this is one point that I want to insist on making and hoping that you will take with you. The skills, especially nowadays, of being a good parent or being a good spouse in today's culture, which is subject to unbelievable change, unbelievable pressures, is something that one can learn and needs to learn. A person cannot assume, I've been a parent 10 years, now I know how to raise a 10-year-old. 10-year-olds are different from 1-year-olds. And you need new learnings. A spouse cannot assume, I've been married 25 years, I know all there is about marriage. I know the guy, I know how to relate to her. It's always something that can be learned and needs to be learned. It can be taught. There's more to learn. There are teachers, whether they are Rabbanim, whether they are psychologists, whether they're educators, whether they're an older generation, mentors, friends. You can learn and you must learn. The fact that learning from the Jewish value system's point of view is a lifelong project is not only true about learning Torah text, it's true also about learning what's called Torah Sa'odom. It's something to constantly learn. People change, people grow, people develop. A person at age 60 is not the same person at age 50 or 40 or 30. New person, there's new techniques, new ways to relate, new issues, new developmental tasks to be achieved. It's extremely important. What are some of the lessons that we know from Torah texts and lahavdil from contemporary studies, sociology, psychology of marriage and of the family? What are some of the teachings that I can share with you tonight? Remember, obviously, tonight is a keynote. There will be follow-up workshops, etc., where people can go in depth and study more on these various topics. And it's a field that one could study for one's entire life. And there are books, Sifrei Kodesh and Sifrei Kol, on hundreds on these topics. But let me just share with you 3 or 4 lessons, approaches, strategies to improving relationships. I'll choose 4. Number 1 is a powerful tool that we all have. It's actually 2 tools that God gave us, the ear and the mouth. One can learn a great deal by keeping one's mouth shut and one's ears open. This is a lesson that Chazal taught us long ago. Shlomo HaMelech and Mishlei taught us long ago. It's one of the hardest lessons of all to learn. I often give talks similar to this to groups of rabbis in training, young would-be rabbis. And they're straight from the yeshiva, from the Beis Medrash. And the Beis Medrash, interestingly enough, you are not taught to be quiet and to listen. You are taught to argue, you are taught to question, you are taught to come up quickly with answers, and that's fine for a Torah study. In interpersonal relationships, however, it's much more powerful to listen. And to listen does not only mean to keep your mouth shut and to listen to the other person, but to keep the inner words in your head quiet. Most of the time when we're talking with each other, the person who is quiet and, quote, listening, is really not listening. He's hearing what the other person is saying, and he's thinking of what he can say in response. They're saying X, Y, Z. Well, I can say A, B, C, and show him that he's wrong, or that he's right. Listening means really being still and quiet, not only verbally in your mouth, but even in your head, and really listening to the other person. And if you're doing anything in your head, it should be, what is this person saying? How can I say it in different words? And maybe even saying out loud. Let me see if I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, and try saying it in a little different words and see if that person says, yes, you understand me. Or, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's so important, a simple, almost game-like experiment. Be quiet, listen to the other person, and reflect back to the person. I think I hear you saying such and such and such and such. Do I get you? Do I really understand you? The other person can say either, you missed it, you're way off, that's not what I was saying. Or you're right on. Or you're close, you're getting warm, but little nuances you're not catching. Extremely important. Listening is fascinating if you think about it. Our religion, unlike other religions and cultures, is based on hearing, on listening. Shema Yisrael, Na'aseh v'nishma, v'hoyem shemo atishbu, on and on and on. And Torah speaks about the privacy of the sense of hearing, not the sense of vision. The sense of vision is important perhaps in Greek culture, where aesthetics and art are important. For the Jew, vision takes second place to listening, to hearing. Shema. Number one. Number two, the most powerful teaching technique that there is modeling. We learn by example. The things in my life that I do well, I learn from other people whom I consciously or unconsciously imitated. Whether they were my grandfathers, Aleinu Bashalom, my father, Olav Bashalom, my various teachers, etc. I watched them, I saw them, I imitate them. Modeling is an extremely important learning technique, teaching technique. There are so many stories about this, I'm hard-pressed to pick just one. But there's one that's my favorite. I'm enamored of the Kosker Rebbe, Greg Menachem Mendel of Lutz. Very, very, very wise man. Someone once came to the Kosker Rebbe, parent, the father, and said, Rebbe, I want to give you a kvittel. Kvittel means a little note with some money, but also with a little request, a prayer, a petitionary prayer. Rebbe, write down my prayer, you pray for this. Giving you a kvittel. So the Rebbe says, what's the kvittel for? What are you praying for? The man said, I'm praying that my son should become a Talmid Chacham. So the Kotzker Rebbe took the kvittel and gave it back to him. I don't want this kvittel. If you want your son to be a Talmid Chacham, don't come here giving kvittel to Rebbes. Go back home and sit down and learn yourself. Your son will see you learning, he will learn too, and he'll become a Talmid Chacham. This way, if you come to me and give me a kvittel, you know what your son will do? He'll come to me in 20 years, and he'll give me a kvittel for his son. You don't raise children by giving kvittel to a Rebbe. You raise children by personal example. The same thing is true in every way. There's a powerful, powerful pasuk in Mishlei which says so much. Kemayim haponim el ponim, kein leiv ha'odam ha'odam. Like a person is in a reflecting pool, that's how the heart of man is to man. It means many different things, but one of the things it means is, if I'm going to influence you in any way, it's like a mirror. If I act in a certain way, you will mirror me. Whether you're my spouse, my child, my neighbor, my friend, my student, you will mirror me. This is why one of the poisons of our culture today are the media, movies, television, internet, etc. Because we and our children see behaviors that are, by any standards, at the very least improper. And there's no way you can see, even on a film screen, even on a TV monitor, even on a computer screen, there's no way you can see another person behaving and not in some way incorporate that behavior into yourself. That's why it's so important to fill the experiences of others with positive ones, teachers, parents, etc. The power of model. It's another extremely important and powerful technique. For this, I'd like to refer to a fascinating book, which is called, the title of the book is called Change, Problem Formulation and Problem Resolution. Way out of print. One of the things I learned long ago is the out-of-print books are usually the better ones. Popular ones, not so much. The authors, many authors, these are people who studied how you get people to change. How do you get people to change? Well, that's what it's all about. We're trying to get people to change in various ways. How do you do that? So one of the techniques is something that the authors here call Bellac's, E-E-L-L-A-C, Bellac's ploy. It's a ploy, it's a scheme, and it's a scheme of a man called Bellac. And it comes from a play by a French playwright named Jean Giraudoux, G-I-R-A-D-O-U-X. The play is called Apollon de Bellac, the Apollo of Bellac. Let me read to you how they describe this ploy. Agnes, a timid girl, is nervously waiting to be called into a president's office for a job interview. Also in the waiting room is a young man who, on learning about her fears, tells her that the simplest way of dealing with people is to tell them that they are handsome. Although at first she is shocked by the apparent dishonesty of this suggestion, he manages to convince her that telling somebody that he is handsome makes him so, and thus there is no dishonesty involved. You tell him he's handsome, he becomes a little handsomer, so you're not lying. And think about it. Sounds cutesy, but take it seriously. She follows his advice and is immediately successful with the grouchy clerk, then with the haughty vice president, and with the directors. Eventually, the president comes storming out of his office. Miss Agnes, for 15 years, this organization has been steeped in melancholy, jealousy, and suspicion. And now suddenly this morning, everything has changed. My reception clerk, ordinarily a species of hyena, the clerk smiles affably, has become so affable, he even bows to his own shadow on the wall. The first vice president, whose reputation for stuffiness and formality has never been seriously challenged, insists on sitting at the directors' meeting in his shirt sleeves. God knows why. The president, too, becomes a changed man as soon as Agnes tells him that he is handsome. A little later, in the presence of his quarrelsome wife, Teresa, he arrives at the most significant conclusion. Namely, that saying to others that they are handsome makes oneself beautiful. And this is the discussion of this president with his wife. Have you ever stopped to wonder, Teresa, why the good Lord made women? Obviously, they were not torn from our ribs in order to make life a torment for us. Women exist in order to tell men that they are handsome. And those who say it the most are those who are the most beautiful. Agnes tells me I'm handsome. It's because she's beautiful. You tell me I'm ugly. Why? Fascinating little sketch. But it's pointing to something which is in these words of Mishlei. Shemayim haponim el ponim kain leiv ha'adam ha'adam. The face that you reflect to the other person, that's what's going to come back at you. You project upon that person, whatever it is, handsomeness, beauty, wisdom, eloquence, whatever. That person will become that much more handsome or beautiful or erudite or eloquent. And so will you in the process. It's an absolute law of human behavior with no exceptions. I heard once a Musa shmuz. I heard in my teenage years Musa shmuzim from the great Gedolei Eretz Yisrael at that time. And I heard a Musa shmuz from Rabbi Cheskel Sarna. And actually it was a Musa shmuz that he gave while we were learning in Yeshiva Bava Kama, which those of you who learned Daf Yomi, you're learning it now. And he said, Yiddish, but I'll translate it to my English, a sour face is a bor rishus harabim. All right? A bor rishus harabim means, in simple English, a public hazard. If you walk around with a sour face, that's a public hazard, no less dangerous than a pit that you dig in the middle of the street where people can fall in. And he went further. I'll never forget this. For so many years, he spoke in Yiddish, and I was a young boy. Maybe I didn't understand it. But I'm pretty sure that this is what he said. He went on to say how silly we are. If I walk through the shtetl, a lot of these Gedolei Yisrael of the 1950s, 1960s still lived in their minds in the pre-World War II shtetl. If I walk through the shtetl, and I see, again in English, the village fool. Every shtetl seems to have a village idiot, a retarded or insane person. He was the village fool. If I pass the village fool, and he looks at me grumpily one morning, and says to me, you again, I feel lousy for the whole morning. I, as the village fool, doesn't make a difference. That grumpiness makes me feel grumpy. On the other hand, strangely enough, if the village fool is prancing and dancing and smiling and laughing, and I see him in the morning, he gives me a smile on my face, and I feel better the entire day. That's the power of the Sefer Ponim Yafos, the power of the smile, the power of the compliment. It's unbelievable. I also had the opportunity in those years, and the years of my long time ago now, to hear several Musa shmuzim from Isaac Sher, who was the Mashgiach Ruchani in the Slobodka Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. An interesting person, because he was the Rosh Yeshiva in Slobodka in Europe. Slobodka in the 1920s, part of it moved to Hebron. Some of them were massacred in the Hebron massacres of 1929. And then they had their Rosh Yeshiva. And Rav Sher came after World War II from Europe, during World War II. And he was rightfully, could have claimed to be the Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka Hebron, but said, no, I'm not going to interfere. I'll go somewhere else, another city, Bnei Brak, start a separate yeshiva. Anyway, he used to tell the story with the two boys in the Beis Medrash. When boys sit and learn Torah, unless they're mamish malachim tzaddikim, every once in a while they battle. Battle, not B-O-T-T-L-E, but beis teslamet, right? They talk about idle things. One of the two boys, this Labat Yeshiva, talk about, Cher says, I was walking by, I heard these two boys talking to each other. And they said, you know, if I were, you pick the name, some legendary millionaire, Rockefeller, Rothschild. I won't speak about local wealthy people whose name starts with R. Rothschild, Rockefeller, known millionaires. Billionaires nowadays, trillionaires. If I were them, one said to the other, I would solve all the problems of the world. I'd give a few $1 million, every kollel would pay top price, every hospital would be funded, every stock of a chesed would be well funded. What does it mean to them? A few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. I would fix the whole world. Tikkun olam. So Cher said, I said to them, boys, first of all, you shouldn't be talking about this, you should be learning. But secondly, you want to fix the world, and you don't have the millions or billions of dollars to do so. You've got something more valuable, more potent, more effective than these dollars. And when you give it, you won't even lose anything. You're saying they won't feel a loss of a few million here or there. If you give what you have, you won't even lose anything. You know what you have? You have kavod, the ability to give kavod, to give honor to another person. Try it. You hear the Rosh Yeshiva give a shir, go over to him later and say, Yasher Koyach, it was a great shir. You hear the Chazan Davni, go over to him and say, I really like that tune. I really like the way you sang Kaladon. Give the other person a little bit of kavod. You don't have to lie. There's always something you can find to compliment. Just give him a little bit of kavod. It won't cost you anything because you have an unlimitable supply, limitless supply of kavod to give. And you will accomplish more than you can accomplish with millions of dollars. Very simple. Maybe you'll even think simplistic. But it's really done, and believe me, as a public speaker and even a shtickle chassan sometimes, I know what it means when a person comes over afterwards and says, Rabbi, good speech. Rabbi, good this, good that. Nice tie, something, all right? It's extremely powerful, extremely powerful. And as they learned in Belak's ploy, not only does it make the recipient feel good, it makes the giver feel good as well. So we have 3 teaching strategies. Pretty simple. Listening, modeling, let's call it Belak's ploy, or giving cover. There's a 4th one that's extremely important. And it's called by various names, but I like to use the word boundaries. In human interaction, there are natural boundaries. And there should be boundaries. In an audience like this, there's literally a boundary down the middle. And it's a boundary that separates the genders. That's, in our society, in our culture, it's an appropriate boundary. But there have to be boundaries in all family relationships. And they include all human relationships, and they include family relationships. You want to know how a social worker or psychologist can go into a family and have immediately the sense of whether this family is functional or dysfunctional. The person looks for the boundaries in that family. Do the mother and father have their own room and their own privacy? Or can the kids just march into the parents' bedroom? Or is there no door even to the parents' bedroom? Is there an allegiance in the family between child and one parent against the other parent? Or do the parents have a boundary around themselves which says, we are the parents, we are the bosses around here, we are the parents on this side of the boundary, you are the kids. Could be 9-year-old kids, could be 16-year-old kids, could be 40-year-old kids. It's a boundary. There's me and mommy, and then there's you. It's not me and you, and then there's mommy. It's the way the boundaries are set up. And it's a family. Mother, father, kids, husband, wife, and outside that boundary are in-laws. Yes, there's a bigger boundary, which includes in-laws, but there's a boundary too around the nucleus family, whether it's just husband and wife, or husband and wife and children, and the in-laws are not part of that family. In our society, especially these days in young marriages, often that boundary's not there. The boundary which has spouse and his or her parent separates the other spouse and his or her parent. And you have this boundary between them instead of a boundary around them. Boundaries are extremely important. They're important in halacha. There are boundaries which have to do with touch, which have to do with the kinds of friendships that you can have with people outside the marriage of the opposite gender. These are all boundaries. And we, all of us who live in today's world, are constantly tempted to cross those boundaries in various ways. But some of those boundaries are Torah boundaries, and some of them are just common sense boundaries. If a husband and wife have a boundary around them, then one spouse or the other is not going to have a very close friendship with someone of the opposite gender. That person is a boundary. Obviously, there's certain relationships that are okay, certain relationships that are outside the boundaries. It's important to talk and to think about boundaries. Not always saying rigid boundaries. Some are more flexible, some are more permeable than others. The boundaries are extremely important. So I've shared with you 4, each of these are books on their own, but you're all intelligent people. And you can take these 4 lessons, listening and modeling and Belak's ploy, giving compliments and kavod, and boundaries, very important. I want to move toward a conclusion with a few words about compromise. In Hirsch's term, it is translated into Hebrew, vatron, vater, to yield to the other person. And I want to draw from the teachings of a man who, unfortunately, I never met in person, but I've become just enamored with his life story, reading a biography about him, and by his sforim in halacha and haggadah, and by this essay that he wrote about marriage. The man was Rabbi Abramsky, Zechet Tzaddik Levracha. When the great Gedolei Yisrael died in the 1960s, I believe, maybe 1970s. He was a Dayan in London. He was a Rav in Slutsk. He was considered by many the Talmud Mufak of Chaim Brisker, or Chaim Soloveitchik. He wrote a sefer called Chazon Yecheskel. It's a series of svarim on the Tosefta. It's a beautiful picture at his funeral. Never seen a picture like this. At his funeral is a picture of his coffin. And on the coffin are the volumes of the svarim that he wrote. He wrote a 10, 12 volume set. That volume is on his coffin as it's carried through the streets in Yerushalayim where he's buried. He served as a dayan in London, 1930s, 1940s. And he wrote some essays in the English language. Hard to get. There are people who will tell you he didn't write it. Abramsky wrote English. But I have them in front of me, I have a photocopy in front of me. I have a little booklet of his with 4 or 5 essays, one of which is about modern marriage. And This is an old-time, old-fashioned lick for Rosh Yeshiva. In England, 1940s, 1950s, the latest that he wrote this. And he's writing about why is there a marriage problem. And this is what he says. He says, I know the basic cause of the marriage problem. Here's perk up. Remember listening? Listen. The cause is the upbringing, or rather the conditioning of the individual. Each man and each woman is reared in the realization of the duty he owes to himself and of the duty he owes to his neighbor. We're all brought up right, correct, wonderful. And Adam, a chaver. There's me, I'm the Adam, and there's you, the chaver. And every once in a while, I gotta give to you, you gotta give to me. If we compromise, I have to take something that's mine, give it to you, take something that's yours, and give it to me. That's how we look at human relationships. That's what we are, in the words of Rabbi, conditioned. In a marriage, writes Rabbi, it's not me and you, and we've got to compromise. So I got to sometimes give in to you, and you got to sometimes give in to me. That's not marriage. Marriage is, yes, there's a me, and there's a you, and there's an us. A we, but us. Think of two circles overlapping. In the middle, there's a we. It's not a separate entity. It's not the guy and the gal. It's not the ish or the isha. It's the couple. Then, over on this side, is the man as a separate individual, and is the woman as a separate individual. Rabbi writes a brilliant insight, and psychologists in the group can, I'm sure, quote much research that bears this out. Refer this to one, a book called The Good Marriage by Judith Wallerstein. There's a lot of research. Basically, it's 400 pages, and it comes up with Rabbi Bramsky, worked was 50 years before. Same idea. Problems in marriage come when either is not enough of the I and the you, and too much of the we. When it's all one overlapping circle, there's no space for me, no separate identity for me, no separate identity for you. We're all kind of mushed together. And then it becomes an enmeshed relationship, and we're too close, and it's too gooey, and it's too... That's one possibility. Or when I'm over here, and you over there, and there's no we. It's me and you, and then we're back to the old way, the way we're conditioned to be. Okay? I'll give you this, you'll give me that, I'll go out Tuesday night, you'll go Wednesday night. There's got to be a balance where there's a space for the, in our words, a space for the individuality of each member of the couple, but also a place where there's the couple. In Wallerstein's book, she says if you look at good marriages, you will see that often one spouse will say, I really don't want to do this, but I'm doing it for the marriage. Not, Sally will say, I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it for Peter. No, I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it for the marriage. I'm doing it for us. Very, very, very important. It's not compromise in the usual sense, but it's rather, it's something in this relationship that's greater, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just me, the guy, and you, the gal. It's a we that's been created. From our perspective, that was created under the chuppah. We came out of the chuppah. We came out as a new entity. It's not Bocher and Sula. It's not Mr. and Mrs. Shep. It's now a unit that comes dancing out from under the chuppah. Obviously, on various occasions, he goes this way, she goes that way. There has to be the separateness. That's the parts of the circles that are not overlapping. But there's one part that's overlapping. This is Rabbi Bramsky's insight, and he says, this is what the Gemara means. When the Gemara speaks of the ideal marriage, Ishto kegufo, Hamachabdo Yoser Megufo. A wife is like the husband's person, literally body, but he honors her more than he honors his own body. What does that mean? She's equal and she's separate. The way in which Ishtaka Gufo, we're one, we're merged. We are a separate entity which is comprised of the two of us, but it's like a corporation. It's a separate entity. And then, Hamachabdo, and there's a relationship where I am you and you are me, and I yield to you and you yield to me. Very, very powerful, extremely powerful analysis of our process. So now I've taught you really 5 lessons that you can take home. Listening and modeling, Balak's ploy, or giving kavod to the other person, boundaries and all of their complex implications, and finally, compromise in the sense of, I'm yielding not to you, because that is a wrestling match. I yield, you yield, but I'm doing this for us, for we, for the marriage. Bronsky's concept. We live, as I began, in very, very, very difficult times. Financially, obviously. Terror threats. Your shul, every shul has to have guards, etc. Anti-Semitism on the rise in places where we thought we'd never see it. Difficulties of all sorts. Technical revolutions, obsolescence of skills, educational difficulties, on and on and on, difficulties and difficulties and difficulties. Obviously, there's no one answer. There are many answers. But one of the answers for how we're going to make it through these next, certainly months, probably years, of great difficulties, great challenges, one of the answers is in the strength of the family, and the extent to which our families become stronger than they are, in which good families become great families. A fascinating book. It's about companies, business companies, good to great. Jim Collins. But his concept is very important. He writes that in the business world, if you're just good, you're going to become obsolete. And you have to work from moving to good to great. If a company says we're good enough, we're making profit, etc., that company's going to go broke in 5 years, 3 years. You have to always go from good to great. The same thing is true in individual growth, spiritual, religious. Certainly, the marital couple, good to great, and in the family, good to great. To the extent that we have great families, we will be able to cope with all the struggles of the world. Bilam, of all people, knew this. When he looked at the Jewish people then were in the desert and had great challenges ahead of them, he said, Ma tovu avolecha Yaakov mishkenosecha Yisrael. It took a goy, an enemy of the Jews, to see Ma tovu avolecha Yaakov, how beautiful was the Jewish family. And that Jewish family, quote to the Pasuk from Tehillim, that Jewish family, although it's a plain old family, my family, your family, is not mighty, it's not powerful. How is it going to fight off all the difficulties in the world, which include physical threats of terror and sinking stock markets, etc.? How is my family going to do that? Kol Rina Yeshua V'Olei Tzadikim. If in the tents of the Tzadikim, in the families, there is Rina Yeshua, there is song and there is hope, there is joy and there is optimism, then Yemin Hashem Osechoy. Then God steps in and wages war, does things that we ourselves could never think possible. But it depends on us cultivating within our families a spirit of Rina, song, of joy, and Yeshua, of optimism, of hope, of positive thinking, of growth, of moving ahead. And then we can be assured of Yemin Hashem Osechoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Weinreb. And I just remind everybody to please fill out the form. cards. Leave us your contact information so we can get in contact with you, email addresses or telephone numbers, whatever you like. And we'll have Marv at the back of the men's section is facing back. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.